Before there were thoughts, there were not even atoms. Before light, before dust, before space had shape, there was a hush. Not a human silence, not even the silence between sounds, but the deep, dimensionless stillness that comes before becoming. You drift there now. Not as a body, not as a mind. You are just a whisper in the void, a tremor of potential stretched across nothing. There is no time here, not yet. No before, no after. Just a hum of possibility. You wait, though waiting has no meaning. You exist, though existence has no edge to define you. And then a flicker. Not a light, not yet, but of imbalance. A tiny rupture, a wrinkle, a deviation from perfect stillness. Not caused, not intended. Just inevitable. From that wrinkle, a rush. Not noise, but rhythm. Not matter, but motion. A swelling wave, a pulse of unfolding. Space stretches outward, not from a center, but from everywhere. Time begins to beat, softly at first, like the first heartbeat of a still-forming creature. The universe is being born, not from thought, but from structure finding itself. You float in the aftermath, where quarks and gluons dance their first wild steps. They do not think, they do not choose, but they follow rules written in the bone of reality. And even those rules, they do not come from a mind. They are the shape of the universe as it breathes itself into being. Not logic from a book, but pattern in a field dot. You see energy cool, curling into form. The first protons, the first neutrons, born in the fire's fading glow. They combine, repel, hold tight. Hydrogen forms like the first word in a language no one speaks. Still, there is no thought, only repetition, reaction, unfolding symmetry. But in that repetition is memory, a kind of persistence that will one day become reflection. Hundreds of millions of years pass, not in minutes, but in a single breath of this newborn cosmos. And in that breath, gravity begins to shape. Not with hands, but with a tug that never lets go. Matter clumps. It gathers. It falls inward, pulled by something that is not desire, but insistence. Stars begin to kindle, not with warmth of heart, but with fusion in their cores. And yet, when you look closely, you feel something like purpose. Not conscious, not chosen, but an unfolding that always seems to lean toward complexity. Stars burn, live, and die. Their deaths scatter metals across space. Iron, carbon, oxygen. Building blocks for future thoughts, future dreams. All seated here in a cosmos still blind to its own becoming. You are not separate from this. The calcium in your bones, the oxygen in your lungs, the carbon in every cell of your being, forged in furnaces that never meant to care, but did create. You are not watching this history. You are this history. The dust that thinks it is more than dust, and somehow, beautifully, is. And still, no thoughts, not yet. The foundations are being laid. Laws settle into shape. Constants remain constant. A kind of cosmic memory etched. In space and time, galaxies spiral into view, clusters drift, collide, and regroup in gravitational ballets. The universe grows structure, like a mind learning the layout of its own dreams. Even now, there is no awareness, no eye to observe. But everything needed for mind is slowly emerging. Matter that remembers how to bond. Energy that knows how to stretch and curl. You hover above the Milky Way, a newborn swirl of stars and gas, and feel the weight of becoming settle softly beneath you. It is not alive, not yet. But it is no longer. Silent. Billions of years unfold, and somewhere in a small corner of this spiral arm, a planet begins to cool. Not chosen, not special, but fertile. Mountains rise, oceans churn, lightning cracks across skies. The chemistry of the cosmos continues to stir. Molecules assemble, disassemble, and assemble again. Until one day, somewhere in a warm pool, something folds in a new way, a way that lets it copy itself, the first fragile echo of intention. The seed of life, cradled in chance, wrapped in rules that have never needed to be explained. You watch it unfold, not as a witness, but as a future memory. And still, thought has not yet arrived. But life has, and life carries with it the future possibility of asking why, of looking up, of wondering. You begin to see it now, the shimmering edge where chance and structure meet, where chemistry becomes curiosity, where existence starts to glance inward, not all at once, not in a flash, but slowly, like dawn rising through thick fog. The cosmos is not thinking yet, but it is preparing to dot, and in that preparation, you feel the first warmth of awareness. A promise folded into molecules, waiting to be remembered. For now, it rests. But soon, it will look up, through eyes not yet formed, under skies not yet seen, and wonder what it is. Because what emerges next is not just life. It is perception, reflection, the beginning of the question that creates the questioner. And with it, the first language of stars. And when those stars begin to speak, they won't use words, but something older, deeper, a pattern that even atoms understand. You float beneath a dark sky, not as a body, but as attention itself. And the sky is not quiet. It hums in wavelengths you can't hear, sings in frequencies too slow for ears, but it sings all the same. This is where a language begins, not in mouths, but in motion, in the ripple of cause into effect. The stars speak in a grammar of heat, sentences made of hydrogen and helium, punctuated by explosions. Each star is a library, not of words, but of transformations. Deep inside, in the dense, blinding core, atoms are pressed into each other with a force that knows no hesitation. You imagine it now, a single proton, born in the aftermath of the Big Bang, carried by chance into a star's heart. It collides. It fuses. It becomes something new. This is fusion, not just energy, but translation. The turning of matter into light, of potential into radiance. A kind of cosmic conversation. And light, that ancient courier, travels across gulfs of space to reach your eyes now. The same light that left its source before your planet had oceans. You are not reading this light. You are being written by it. The calcium in your teeth, the iron in your blood, forged in stellar cores, long vanished. You are stardust with memory. Stars do not think, but they shape what will think. They do not know they are building possibility, but they are, slowly, without pause, without plan. Just burning, just becoming. Some live briefly, flaring white-hot, collapsing in a final shout of supernova. Others endure for billions of years, steady and slow, like long-held breaths. Their deaths are not endings, but distributions. The heavy elements spilled into space like seeds carried by wind. These seeds fall into clouds of dust and gas, where new stars gather, where planets form, where atmospheres and oceans wait. It's a long story, told without haste. A quiet continuity. Fusion becomes formation. Formation becomes chemistry. And somewhere down the line, chemistry begins to wonder. But we are not there yet. We are still with the stars, with their radiant patience, with their slow vocabulary of light. You close your eyes, or would, if you had them, and feel how a star's life is a rhythm, not unlike a breath. Inhale. Gravity pulls matter inward. Exhale. Fusion pushes energy outward. These two forces hold each other in balance, like two dancers leaning just enough to keep from falling. And that balance, that tension, is what makes a star live. When gravity wins, the star collapses. When fusion wins, it tears itself apart. But when they match, for a while, there is life. There is warmth, there is time, Dot, and so, stars teach balance. Not through lesson, but through example. They show how opposing forces can coexist to create something luminous. You drift deeper now, into the layers of a red giant, where shells of burning helium surround a collapsing core. Dot. It is a furnace of memory, each layer a chapter in the life of an atom. And still, no mind, no thought, only process, only pattern. But isn't that what language is? Not the thought itself, but the path it takes to become visible. A shape in motion, a ripple through medium. The star doesn't think, but it teaches the conditions that allow thought. Without its heat, no liquid water. Without its metals, no complex molecules. Without its gravity, no planet stable enough. To cradle minds. Dot. It is easy to think of stars as distant, as background lights to our little lives. But they are not background. They are foundation. Every second, the sun fuses 600 million tons of hydrogen. Every second, it loses mass to light, energy that takes 8 minutes to reach your skin. Light you feel is warmth, but which began in the heart of a nuclear storm. And yet, that light feels gentle. It paints leaves green. It glimmers on the surface of lakes. It stirs rhythms in the circadian minds of birds and people. You begin to understand. The star is not thinking of you, but it is speaking into you. Its fire becomes your food, your breath, your ability to gaze upward and wonder. Perhaps the stars do not need to be aware, because their very being is transmission. Not in the way that minds transmit, but in a deeper, more structural way. They are the vocabulary of the cosmos, not describing meaning, but creating the conditions for it to exist. They do not explain. They enable. And so, you are left with this, a sense that the universe is fluent, even without speech. That meaning does not always require a speaker, because when you lie beneath the night sky and feel something stir in your chest, what moves in you is not just metaphor. It is connection, lineage, memory. You are listening to a language older than biology, older than thought, made of energy shaped into order. And that order continues, echoing outward into the next mystery. How atoms, born in stars, begin to join, bond, and build without instruction. Only with inclination. Somewhere in the vast quiet of the early universe, a carbon atom drifts. It does not know it is carbon. It does not know anything, but it is shaped by something older than knowledge, to laws that cradle all things. You turn your attention toward it, not with eyes, but with wonder. It is small, unimaginably so, but in its bonds, whole worlds are possible. 6 protons at its core, 6 electrons in orbit, held in place by an invisible symmetry. Not thought, not intention, but balance. There is no mind here, but there is memory of a sort, not of events, but of tendency. This atom knows how to reach for others, how to form chains, rings, lattice. Not because it wants to, but because it must. This is what it means to organize without mind. Patterns emerge not from plans, but from possibility becoming real. You imagine it linking with hydrogen, then oxygen, then nitrogen. Simple atoms forming complex chains, molecules with curves and branches, like letters forming sentences. And this alphabet, it writes not stories, but structures, crystals, proteins, cells, each more intricate than the last, but each obeying the same simple rules. You wonder, is this intelligence? Not in the way you understand it, not reflective, not aware, but it is responsive, predictable. And with enough repetition, it begins to build. Take water, for instance. 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. Nothing extraordinary. But arrange billions of them, and you get oceans. Waves that crash and rise, currents that remember the pull of the moon. Or salt, sodium and chlorine, volatile alone, stable together. Arrange them in a cubic lattice, and suddenly they sparkle. They crunch beneath your feet. They preserve food. They flavor life. This is how the universe builds, from repetition, from constraint, from atoms obeying their quiet choreography. Still, nothing thinks. And yet, something feels intentional in the way complexity arises. You picture a cloud of molecules drifting in warm, shallow water on a young planet. Sunlight stirs the soup, lightning dances above it, and molecules bump and bind again and again. Most combinations fall apart, but some hold. Some fold into stable forms, twisting just so, creating pockets that can cradle, trap, react. You watch as one such molecule forms a loop, a shape that copies itself. A soft gasp in the fabric of time. No one plans it, no one guides it. But once it happens again. This is self-organization. The moment when matter begins not to think, but to persist. And that persistence is powerful. Because to persist is to resist entropy, even if only for a moment. To hold shape, to create boundaries, to remember how to be. You are watching logic arise from matter. Not abstract logic, but physical, embodied, tested by time. If this, then that. If hot, move. If bond, then dot, and across the eons, those little logical steps build structures that loop, adapt, cooperate. Not because they want to, but because the universe has allowed it. There is something beautiful in this. No blueprints, no architect, just atoms following rules, and those rules building lives. You recall how snowflakes form, each one unique, yet all obeying the same constraints. A dance between water, temperature, and time. Symmetry emerging from randomness. Structure without. A sculptor dot, so it is with the molecules of life. Carbon, so generous with its bonds, becomes the backbone of all things living. It links again and again, spinning webs of possibility. Proteins, sugars, lipids, DNA dot, and inside these molecules, function arises. Catalysts that speed reactions. Barriers that hold contents. Instructions that guide construction dot. It is not thought, but it is the beginning of systems that will someday produce thought. You rest with that thought for a while. Not all order requires a mind. Sometimes, order is the mindless unfolding of possibility within constraint. You are watching matter find itself, not suddenly, not purposefully, but with persistence, with patience. And maybe that is the deepest kind of wisdom, not the kind that speaks, but the kind that forms without being told to form. A knowing that doesn't know it knows. Atoms do not plan, but they build. And from that building, new levels of possibility appear. What begins as fusion in stars becomes molecules in clouds, becomes structure in oceans, becomes life, becomes memory, becomes the chance to ask questions dot. And so you lie quietly with that awareness, with the strange idea that maybe intelligence isn't only found in thoughts. Maybe it's hidden in the way matter moves, in the way it holds, forms, and repeats. Maybe the universe has always known how to build minds, even before minds existed to wonder. And somewhere, inside the organized swirl of atoms, the faintest spark of direction begins, not a decision. Not yet, but a nudge towards something more. You lie still, but you are never not falling. There is no edge, no downward pull, as you might expect. But gravity is here, always here, not dragging you down, but holding you close. It tugs without tension, wraps itself around you not like a hand, but like a gentle curvature of space itself. You are falling not toward the ground, but along invisible curves drawn into the fabric of everything. There's no sound to it, no pressure, no hum. Just presence, quiet, unquestioned. You are part of its story, whether or not you know it. You imagine a pebble resting on a stretched sheet, A marble rolls past it, not because the pebble reaches out, but because the sheet has curved. The marble cannot help but follow. So too does the earth circle the sun. So too does your body settle into your bed. Not pushed, not pulled, but eased along the shape that space becomes in gravity's presence. You used to think of gravity as a force, invisible string pulling down. But the truth, like many truths, is softer than that. Not forceful, graceful. Einstein once whispered to the world that gravity is not a thing that acts, but a shape that exists. Space bends in everything. Light, time, planets, you, follows the bend. You are always gliding through these curves, like a leaf caught in the shape of a stream. Even now, lying in stillness, you are being nudged through time by gravity's quiet insistence. Not in haste, not in command, just in certainty. The earth turns, the moon orbits, tides rise and fall, all from this silent choreography. And here is the wonder. Gravity does not think. It does not know you, nor does it need to. Yet it cradles you every second of your life. It binds the oceans to the shore and holds stars together. It is blind and brilliant, deaf and divine. How does something so simple, mass, call into existence something so immense? Perhaps it's like this. If you place your weight into a hammock, the fabric bows. Space does the same. Mass rests within it, and space bows in response. The more mass, the deeper the dip. Planets make valleys. Stars carve wells. Black holes make something deeper than language. You have never seen gravity, but you see its signature in everything. The flight of a falling leaf, the slow spin of a galaxy, the ache in your legs at the end of the day. You feel its fingerprint. On your bones, your breath, your sense of up and down. You wonder, does gravity create intention where none exists? After all, it is gravity that assembles stars from dust, that gathers atoms into the bodies of planets, that keeps the earth warm, circling a distant sun. Is this guidance? Is this purpose? Or just the unfolding of form following form, as simple as water flowing downhill? And yet, what flows from this quiet pull is astonishing. Gravity creates the conditions for time to move forward, for heat to concentrate, for chemistry to take root. Without it, there would be no stars to shine, no planets to walk on, no bodies to breathe, no moments to remember. Imagine a cloud of gas, drifting for eons, too thin, too scattered to become anything. But gravity waits. Slowly it gathers, pulls, particles closer, closer still. And at some unseen tipping point, heat flares at the center. A star is born, not from decision, but from inevitability. You are made of atoms fused in such stars. Your breath is borrowed from their explosions. Your skin remembers their light. And behind all of this, gravity, the silent weaver, makes the loom on which life may someday be stitched. There is no haste to its work. It is slow, slower than thought, slower than dreams, but no less profound. If you could drift above the earth, you'd see the clouds swirl not randomly, but in patterns guided by gravity's curves. You'd see oceans pulled into bulges by the moon, its gravity sculpting tides with invisible fingers. Even your heartbeat is, in a distant sense, timed by this force. The rhythm of your life answers the rhythm set by gravity long before you were born. You might wonder, could gravity be a kind of memory? Not the memory of mind, but of structure. The way a river remembers the path it carved through stone. The way mountains remember the tectonic lift. The way light remembers to bend near a star. If space has shape, and shape directs motion, then perhaps gravity is the way universe remembers where things should go. Still, gravity offers no map, no plan. It does not command. It does not foresee. It does not ask. It only is. And yet, Through its isness, everything else becomes. You might picture gravity as the inkless author of a silent poem, written across billions of years. Its lines are orbits. Its verses are galaxies. Its rhythm pulses in the quiet collapse of stars and the slow spin of moons. You lie there, still, and gravity holds you not tightly, but faithfully. It does not seek your attention. It does not need it. But if you notice, if only for a moment, you feel something vast resting beneath you. Not heavy, but deep. Not demanding, but undeniable. You fall, always, into this curve. Into the arms of a presence that is never spoken, yet is always guided. And still, something stirs in you. A question. Not about what gravity does, but why it's there at all. Why mass bends space? Why space listens? Why time, in turn, is never quite straight? Perhaps, in seeking the answers, you begin to wonder if there are other forces, just as silent, shaping everything without ever asking to be seen. That's something even subtler than gravity. Something not bound to shape, but to chance. Something that moves not in arcs, but in rolls of invisible dice. Something like ... entropy. It begins so quietly, you almost miss it. A few molecules drifting in warm, ancient waters. No plan, no architect. Just a stirring. One bump, one bond, one chance meeting between pieces too small to see. And yet, here is the beginning of something more. You watch it unfold, not with a shout, but with a whisper. Atoms that once floated freely now cling together. In delicate dances, some combinations break apart, some dissolve, some persist. And the ones that stay? They shape what comes next. This is emergence. The moment when the whole becomes something greater than its parts. A ripple in the pond becomes a spiral in the sea. A spiral becomes the basis for a cell. And a cell, just a sack of reactions, becomes a creature that can sense, move, and eventually dream. No conductor commands this orchestra. Each note follows from the last. Simple rules, repeated over time, build cathedrals of complexity. And you sitting here are made from those rules. Not one, not two, but billions, nested and humming together like a great, living engine. Emergence isn't a machine you build. It's a fire that lights itself. Watch how ants form highways without maps or leaders. How clouds gather from air and rise into towering shapes. How neurons, by simply firing, generate a thought. There is no single moment when it decides to happen. No switch flipped. Instead, like a tide that slowly gathers until it spills over the shore, emergence builds beneath notice until it becomes everything. A flock of birds turns in unison, a murmuration. No leader says, "Turn now," yet all do. Each bird watches, only its neighbors, and yet the sky itself seems to bend with intention. That is the secret. Emergence feels like purpose, but is made from pattern. It looks like design, but comes from connection. It isn't planned, but it is not chaos either. A snowflake begins with one ice crystal. Then 6 arms grow, tracing the path of temperature and wind. No two snowflakes are the same, yet all follow the same simple laws. From sameness, difference. From difference, beauty. You can't look at a single water droplet and see a wave, but gather enough, and rhythm begins. A single neuron doesn't think, but arrange enough in certain ways, and a mind begins to glow. You are not just a brain, but a being. And even that sense of being, your feeling of I, is an emergent echo. Step back. Imagine the early Earth again. Warm pools beneath violet skies. Molecules dancing, touching, splitting, recombining. No prophecy, no prediction. Just possibility. But possibility, repeated, becomes probability. And probability, repeated, becomes pattern. And pattern, patient, persistent, becomes life. Mirror begins to form, not a glass one. A mirror made of feedback, of awareness, of systems that begin to notice their own motion. A colony of cells learns to feel. A sea sponge responds to light. A fish flickers past a shadow. Somewhere in that chain, an organism first wonders. Not in words, not in thoughts. Just in attention, and from attention, imagination. You emerge. You, who can look back and trace the trail. Who can feel the complexity of your own presence and ask how a cloud of dust became a question. You are not outside emergence. You are what emergence looks like from the inside. A self-aware ripple in the fabric of matter. A song sung by molecules learning to harmonize. Look at your hands. They are built from patterns. Proteins folding into shapes they've learned to love. Nerves wrapped around bones that remember how to grow. Listen to your breath. Air moves in and out like the tides. Your lungs rise not just with oxygen, but with memory. You are not a single thing. You are thousands of systems coexisting, digesting, pulsing, remembering, repairing, each obeying its own rules, yet contributing to a single experience. It feels almost magical. But it isn't magic. It's emergence. The slow accumulation of simple actions that, together, become something else. The mind was not invented. It was not placed in the skull like a gem in a crown. It formed like a mountain does, from layers, building, pressurizing, until the world simply changed. And now, the mirror turns toward the stars. You wonder if what happened here has happened elsewhere. Are there other mirrors, learning to see? Other emergent minds watching waves turn into thoughts. You dream not only of yourself, but of everything that could arise from everything that is. Emergence opens that dream, wide and endless, not from command, but from the quiet promise of pattern, the gentle insistence of connection. And as you rest, as your thoughts begin to float and combine in your own sleeping mind, you carry with you that deep truth that out of the smallest things, the most extraordinary stories emerge. So when the dark comes and silence returns, you listen again, not for answers, but for the feeling of something taking shape in the quiet, not built, not spoken, just rising, as all things do from what was always already there. And in the morning, perhaps you'll ask, if emergence gives rise to life, what else might it become? You sit with the silence of stone. It does not stir. It does not seek. Yet from the same atoms that sleep in rock, something once began to move. A shimmer, a flicker, not a miracle, but a pattern. Not born in defiance of nature, but shaped by it. Life. You trace it back through warm tides and long patience. Back to when Earth was not yet Earth as you know it, just a churning, restless chemistry. Oceans not yet blue, skies not yet clear. But within the stew, hints. Molecules bending, linking, testing combinations. There is no divine spark here, no lightning bolt decree, just persistence. Just chance repeated over eons. Just the quiet, stubborn unfolding of what can happen. Will happen, if given enough time. Life is not a rare accident in the universe. It is what happens when matter lingers in warmth, bathed in light, surrounded by space to change. A cell is not a magic trick. It is a lesson in patience. The first ones were nothing more than bubbles. Tiny sacs trapping water, a skin around. Possibility. Inside, molecules jostled. Some bumped in ways that made them stick together. Others helped reactions flow a little faster. Still others copied themselves, imperfectly, but enough to grow. And the universe, indifferent but fertile, offered everything they needed. Heat, carbon, pressure, tides, time. You imagine the earth turning under a young sun. Imagine tides pulling in and out, stirring warm pools on volcanic shores. There, perhaps something began to notice itself. Not consciously, not with thought, but with persistence. Some bubbles burst, others held. Some molecules fell apart. Others stayed joined over countless repetitions, those that lasted longer, and those that lasted longer grew. Life is not something inserted into matter. It emerges from matter, like steam rising from hot tea, like whirlpools forming in a stream. This is emergence, not from nowhere, but from the deep grammar of physics and time, wherever the conditions are just right, wet enough, warm enough, complex enough. Patterns of life have a tendency to appear, not guaranteed, but not rare. You might think life is too precise, too organized. But even a snowflake, with its six-fold symmetry, emerges from nothing more than frozen water and air. Life is a snowflake stretched across time. Look again. The instructions for life are not written in ink, but in the way molecules attract, the way energy flows, the way carbon bonds bend. Ancient ocean. Those first molecules didn't follow a script. They followed probability. What could happen? Eventually did. And once a pattern begins, it builds upon itself. A spiral forming in a storm, a rhythm locking in, self-sustaining, self-changing. Soon, cells learn to divide, to keep the pieces that help them, to drop what doesn't. They begin to remember. Not with minds, but with molecules. Memory is chemistry. Before it is thought, they remember how to make proteins, how to pass copies of themselves, how to grow. They form communities, mats, layers, colonies. The earth breathes a little more with each breath they take. Oxygen fills the sky, not by design, but because these new forms of life began to spill it out as waste. And waste becomes weather, becomes ecosystems, becomes air you can one day breathe. You are not standing apart from this chain. You are an air of warm ponds and lucky chains. Your hands, your breath, your thoughts, all built on the persistence of molecules that refuse to stay still. This is the quiet miracle of probability. Given the laws of physics and enough time, complexity is not forbidden. It is invited. You think of other planets now, silent, cold, or maybe not. Maybe beneath their surfaces, in some warm sea or hidden cave, the dance has already begun. Somewhere, molecules may be stirring, reaching, copying, bubbling toward the next version of life. Maybe it's not us who are rare, but only our form. The tendency toward life, toward matter that moves, adapts, feels, might be a property of the universe itself, not a fluke. A tendency. Like gravity pulls, like heat spreads, life emerges. Not by chance, not by plan, but by the laws of nature playing themselves out. So when you breathe tonight, know that your breath is part of a very old current, older than thought, older than memory, but never quite still. And just as life blooms from matter, thought blooms from life. You wonder then if thought is not rare either, just the next unfolding. There are memories older than thought, older than minds, older than dreams. You are drifting now, not through storybooks or sleep, but through the first quiet libraries of time. But not everything that remembers must think. Not everything that learns must know. Even before brains were born, before neurons ever whispered, there were strands and spirals that carried traces of experience. Not in sentences, not in pictures, but in patterns that favored survival. In the trembling language of molecules, life began to write its earliest notes in ink made of time. You imagine yourself now as small can be, a visitor in a droplet of ancient ocean. Here, long before you existed, fragments of life are trying, failing, and trying again, not with intention, not with desire, but with a strange pull toward what endures. In this tide of possibility, some molecules break apart, some stick, Some build. Some fall into forms that somehow persist. Chains of RNA, those single-stranded messengers, twist into loops that fold just so. And folding, they become something else. Not just structure, but function. Not just presence, but purpose. They copy themselves. Imperfectly. Some shapes survive better than others. Those that last, not strongest, not smartest, but simply most stable, remain to echo into the next moment. The ocean remembers, not because it chooses to, but because it can't help it dot every replication, a test, every mistake, a chance. And so memory begins not as thought, but as recurrence, not as decision, but as momentum. You touch a thread of this unfolding. An RNA strand loops around your fingers like a ribbon. It feels warm, as if held by time itself. This is not your memory, yet it holds the memory of your becoming. It is the memory of what worked once, what survived assault and light and chaos. Some loops of RNA become better at copying others. Some become tiny tools, folding into shapes that nudge chemistry in useful ways. These are the molecular ancestors of all learning. Not neural networks, but chemical ones. Little experiments that remember only by becoming. A shape that lasts is a lesson kept. You see now how this becomes more. A droplet becomes a cell. A cell learns how to divide. Not because it understands, but because its parts are arranged to succeed. It doesn't think, but its success is the result of a kind of logic, one that remembers what once endured. Even in these humble beginnings, the seeds of memory are there. A copy, a variation, a consequence. This is evolution, yes, but also in a way, a memory machine without a mind. You drift now through time. The ocean ages around you. From single molecules, chains emerge that build walls, membranes, delicate curtains that define inside. And out, with walls comes identity. With identity comes history. Each cell carries a past in the shape of its parts. The memory isn't stored somewhere separate. It is the cell. It's how the cell lives some begin to sense. Not feel, not yet, but sense gradients, light, heat, nutrients. The ones that move toward what sustains them last a little longer. And so even motion becomes a kind of recall. Turn left, that worked last time. Turn right, that didn't. No brain, no synapses. Just feedback, etched into molecules. You think of learning as something that happens in heads. But the universe was learning long before heads appeared. The cosmos has always responded to its own echoes. Matter rearranges. Patterns repeat. Persistence becomes preference. And preference becomes, eventually, memory. Some of these molecular tricks become so stable they pass from one cell to another, not only through genes, but through the shape of the environment, the presence of certain ions, the way a protein folds. These are epigenetic memories, whispers that float alongside the genetic code. Memories shaped by experience, but passed down like treasures in a chest. The chest opens in you. You realize that you are built not just from DNA, but from the inherited outcomes of 1 billion forgotten lessons. You are the result of unspoken remembering. Each cell in your body is the library card of an ancient library. And yet, for all this memory, there is still no mind. Still no dreaming. Still no wonder, but you feel it building. You feel the layers of pattern and replication reaching toward something more. As if memory alone might one day birth imagination. As if structure could lead, somehow, to surprise. You float back now, through time, through sea, through silence. What you have seen isn't consciousness, but its shadow on the wall of matter. A prelude to thought. A memory made not by choice, but by chemistry that endured. And you wonder, gently, when does memory begin to feel? When does pattern become perception? When does a molecule dream of the sun? You drift into a place where silence thinks. There are no words here, no internal monologues, no ticking of language. But things still happen, leaves still turn toward light. Coral polyps still pulse with rhythm, and jellyfish still change direction, responding not with reason, but with rhythm. You flow quietly through this wordless realm, and something about it feels strangely familiar. It is not alien. It is older. A jellyfish moves through the sea like a ghost remembering how to swim. It has no brain, no neurons as you know them, only a nerve net. A lattice of electrical touch points stretching across its transparent body. And yet it reacts. It adjusts. It knows somehow how to keep itself afloat, how to flee a sting, how to pulse just enough to keep moving toward food or away from threat. Not knowing as you know it, but something more ancient. A knowing before language. You picture it. The sea, warm and shallow, 1 billion years ago. Life blooming, undivided, unclassified. Here, decision is not a dialogue, but a dance. The jellyfish does not plan, but it does change. It is guided by gradients of light, salinity, and sensation. This, too, is thought, if you soften the definition. Not the kind that sits and contemplates, but the kind that flows, that folds around the shape of the world and answers with movement. Thought does not require words. Far beneath the waves, bacteria navigate using chemical trails. They have no neurons, no awareness as you define it, but they sense. They drift toward sugar, away from acid. They swim upstream in microscopic rivers of information. They record what works, chemically. They adjust. Even without minds, they weigh options, albeit in a primitive, probabilistic way. A whisper of cognition, embedded in the cell. Then you rise from the ocean and step into green stillness. A forest surrounds you. Roots twist through soil, stretching toward moisture they cannot see. Leaves adjust their angle to follow the sun's golden arc. Trees, too, behave. Not quickly, but surely. A sapling grows toward a gap in the canopy. A vine coils toward warmth. Everything here is thinking, but none of it is saying anything. Underneath, there is more. Mycelial networks. Thin threads of fungi lace the earth like an invisible web. They connect roots to roots, trees to trees. One tree warns another of beetles. A dying stump is fed sugar by its neighbors. This communication is slow, chemical, electrical, and precise. It is not conscious in the way your own mind is, but it is not random either. A forest processes. A forest chooses. You sit down and breathe in. Even in your own body, not all thought speaks. The heart adjusts to your breathing. The gut reacts to emotion before the brain does. The immune system learns and remembers, launching attacks without your awareness. You think you are in control, but much of your body is thinking without asking your permission. Thought lives in muscle, hormone, cell. Somewhere in the grass, a slime mold stretches. It too has no brain, but it solves mazes. It finds the most efficient paths between food sources. If split into pieces, it regroups and begins again. It remembers, in a way not with neurons, but with shape and flow. You watch it and wonder, how much of intelligence is structure? How much of memory is form? Language, you realize, is a late invention. A powerful one, yes, but not the first tool for thought. For millions of years, thought moved through light and touch, scent and feedback. Bees dance their directions. Octopuses change colors. Even cells, like those in your own body, vibrate with informational rhythm signals moving in silence. You look up. The wind brushes through the leaves like a hand across strings. A murmuration of starlings sways in unison overhead. A flock turns as one, a liquid sculpture in the air. No leader guides them. Each bird follows its neighbor, and from that simple rule, great patterns emerge. Emergence, another kind of thinking. Not housed in a single brain, but in the space between. Ant colonies function this way too. No ant knows the whole plan. But together, they build, decide, adapt. The colony has intelligence, but it is distributed, unspoken. If you listen only for language, you miss this. You miss most of it. There is something humbling in that dot. You were raised to believe that thinking happens only in the head, only in the words that echo behind your eyes. But here, in the hush of the forest or the sway of the ocean, thought exists without speech, without identity, without noise. You are not above it. You are within it. You feel your breath slowing. You begin to wonder what it would be like to think without words. To drift through a moment the way a jellyfish drifts through current. To answer without needing to name. To remember without needing to record. What would it be like to live without the chatter, without the constant commentary of the mind? You do it every night. In sleep. Dreams are a kind of wordless thought. Stories unfold without grammar. You fly, you fall, you change shape. Nothing is said, and yet so much is felt. Meaning pulses through image, sensation, rhythm. You navigate a strange world guided not by logic, but by something older. Something closer to the way a forest thinks. And perhaps that's what you're drifting toward now. The edge of sleep. To return to that inner wilderness. You imagine your mind as a quiet forest, its pathway soft with moss, its thoughts curling like vines. Nothing speaks here, but everything moves. You are not gone. You are simply not talking. In this stillness, you begin to feel something new blooming beneath thought. Or perhaps it's something very old. And maybe, just maybe, what comes next is not about words at all, but about the feeling of remembering. Before you know, you even forgot. You were never handed a map, but your brain drew one anyway. No architect planned it. No blueprint spelled out where each cell should go. And yet, slowly over time, it grew. It grew itself. Even now, inside your quiet skull, it continues. You are not just thinking. You are becoming. In the womb. Your first neurons flickered to life like stars in a forming galaxy. One by one, then hundreds, then billions. Not a machine built in order, but a forest expanding in every direction. A soft storm of cells, each branching outward like vines searching for sunlight. They do not wait for permission. They do not need words. They reach. They try. They connect. The brain grows itself by asking a simple question again and again. What fires together? What belongs? And with every repeated answer, the connections grow stronger. Little pathways carve deeper into the dark. Some links are forgotten. Others are reinforced. The brain prunes itself like a gardener, removing what no longer thrives. Experience is its soil. Repetition is its rain. And your life, the way you look, listen, feel, and wonder, is the light it grows toward. No two brains are ever the same. Even identical twins, who begin with matching genes, drift apart in the landscape of their minds. Not because they want to, but because each breath, each blink, each moment of quiet adds or subtracts from the great mosaic inside. And this, quietly, is what makes you you. Not something fixed, but something flowering. You do not store your life in one place. There is no single cabinet where memories are filed. Instead, thoughts spread out across many rooms at once. Smell, sound, feeling, motion, all scattered. Like stars in a night sky, yet somehow always able to form a shape when you remember. Remembering is not just retrieving. It is rebuilding. Each time you call up a memory, you reshape it, gently. Like a potter's hand returning to clay, smoothing, softening, bending. You never remember exactly the same thing twice. And still, the brain hums. Even in sleep, it edits and rewires, testing new paths. Even in silence, it watches patterns, checks predictions, listens for change. It grows through use, not like a machine worn down by work, but like a muscle strengthened through motion. Like a trail deepened by footsteps. Like water shaping stone. You are not the same as you were yesterday, and you will not be the same tomorrow. Children's brains grow fast because they are open, curious, unfiltered, elastic. The world rushes in, and their minds stretch to meet it. But your brain never truly stops. It only grows more selective. It learns how to tune the noise. It learns what to keep and what to gently let go. Practice something new, a language, a rhythm, a way of seeing, and you'll feel the tug of unfamiliar paths opening. The synapses wake up. Distant neurons begin to reach. You're growing a new trail, deep inside your forest of thought. Sometimes you struggle. Sometimes things don't stick. That's part of it too. The brain learns through mistakes. It adjusts, recalibrates, reshapes. Each error is not failure, but feedback, a nervous system's gentle way of saying, try again, but differently. Even imagination is learning. Even daydreams are data. And then there's the strangest truth of all. The brain built itself without ever fully understanding itself. A self-growing system, a loop, a pattern inside a pattern. Neurons shaping thought, thought shaping neurons. You are both the sculptor and the clay. From the outside, it looks like a quiet head. But inside, there are rivers of electricity, bursts of chemistry, conversations between billions of cells, all whispering at once. Grow this, forget that, try. Again, language helps, but it isn't required. Even without words, your brain knows how to learn. Even in stillness, it prepares for movement. Even in sleep, it makes decisions you won't remember. And in moments of peace, like this one, you can almost feel it, the hush of inner work. The garden of thought continuing to grow, leaf by leaf, in the soft light of awareness. This is not a machine inside your skull. It is an unfolding, a living sculpture still forming its shape. And what it shapes next depends on what you pay attention to. What you repeat, what you believe, what you love. So you breathe and listen and notice what stirs when you are still. And far inside you, something leans toward the light, because the brain is not just a place where thought happens. It is a place where thought learns to happen better. A self-organizing rhythm, a deepening intelligence. But even with all its mystery, there's one question it cannot answer on its own. Who is doing the listening inside? And where in all this? Growing and changing is the part of you that simply watches. That quiet watcher, that presence behind the thought, is where we drift next. You are not a static thing. You are not a stone in the stream. You are the current itself, curling, doubling back, rejoining. Each thought you have is not a separate object, but a wave that folds into another wave, a motion that stirs the next. You don't simply think. You are the process of thinking. Like wing-forming patterns in a field of tall grass, you shape and are shaped. You direct and are directed, all at once. Your brain doesn't store thoughts like files in a cabinet. There are no tidy rows, no index cards marked joy or regret. Instead, each idea you hold lives in patterns, in the flicker of networks, the pulsing loops of activity that shift and reshape with time. A memory is not a place. It is a pattern replayed. When you remember, you don't open a drawer. You reweave the experience, filling it with present breath, present feeling, even if you don't realize it. And so, you are the sum of what your brain is practicing, repeating, reinforcing. Thoughts that loop again and again become easier to find, like a trail pressed down through tall grass. The more you walk it, the clearer it becomes. You are that path. You are the traveler, and you are the way through. When you speak to yourself, when that soft inner voice rises, you are hearing not just language, but the brain's echo, the brain watching itself think. It's like watching a candle light its own flame. Inside your head, regions talk to each other constantly. Networks for attention, for emotion, for planning, singing across gaps, making meaning through timing and pattern, not by command. I imagine a conductor, but it's more like jazz. 1,000 instruments improvising together, each influencing the other, listening and responding in real time. Sometimes the music soars. Sometimes it loops back on itself, caught in the same phrase. Sometimes it quiets into stillness you can't explain but deeply feel. You are not separate from this music. You are the music. Not a passenger in the brain's vehicle, but the rhythm and shape of the journey. This is what it means to be a self. Not a fixed object with clear edges, but a moving harmony of inner experience, ever-changing, yet held together by the feeling that I am. But where does that I come from? It's not located in a single place. There's no secret center. The you feel is an emergent pattern, a story told across many voices, stitched together by the brain's insistence on coherence. You are a pattern that predicts itself. Your brain constantly models the world, and part of that world is you. Your body, your feelings, your past. It weaves these into a narrative, not to tell perfect truth, but to help you navigate, to help you survive, to give continuity to your days. And so, the you who wakes each morning is not the same you who went to sleep, but the thread is carried forward. Enough of the pattern remains to whisper, here I am again. This pattern is not fixed. It evolves. Every conversation, every joy, every sadness, every quiet moment tugs gently at the weave. You are the loom and the thread. You are the design that remakes itself. And this, too, is why change feels so strange. To shift how you think, to reshape. The pattern is to become a slightly different you. That is what the brain does best. It adapts. Neuroplasticity, they call it. The ability of neurons to change their wiring, to unlearn, relearn, refine, and try again. Even as you read these words, your brain is adjusting. Subtle currents flowing in new directions. Soft rewritings underway. And if you wonder who's doing that, the answer is, you are. Not by effort alone, but by simply being present, listening, curious. That's enough. That's how the pattern learns. This is what consciousness may be. Not a spotlight shining from above, but a flickering campfire around which many parts of the brain gather, telling stories into the dark. You are both the fire and the storyteller. You warm yourself by your own flame, and in doing so, you give it shape. You are not your thoughts. You are not your feelings. You are the relationship between them, the movement, the dance, the unfolding. And in that motion is your freedom. You can't control every step of the pattern, but you can listen. You can guide it gently, like steering a raft in a wide living river. So tonight, as you lie in stillness, you are not empty. You are a quiet motion, the continuation of a long, luminous story written in pulses and loops and light. And that story will continue through sleep, in dreams that feel like echoes, in images that drift between thought and feeling, reminding you, you are not just the pattern that thinks, but the dream that wonders what it means to be. Because if your brain tells a story to itself, what happens when that story dreams of being free? There is a temptation to believe that you live somewhere behind your eyes. A small watcher, sitting in the control room of your mind, steering thought and sensing the world from a central chair. It feels true, doesn't it? That there is a solid I, a single self who dreams, who listens, who chooses. But the deeper you go into the folds of the brain, the harder that I is to find. You peel back layers of memory, of vision, of decision, and there is no master switch, no conductor. Only patterns, only whispers that pass like wind between the trees of neurons. Your brain is a chorus without a soloist. Billions of neurons, each firing their tiny electric sparks, unaware of any self at all. They are like birds in flight, no single one leading, but together forming shapes that seem deliberate. A murmuration, they call it, when starlings swirl in coordinated waves across the evening sky. That's you. A murmuration of mind. No center, no controller, and yet a beautiful, ordered dance. You think you are steering, but the dance is steering itself. In ancient times, people imagined the soul as a fixed gem, glowing behind the forehead. Now we know it's more like a weather system. Not a pearl, but a storm. Not a captain, but a Kant, moving because of countless forces, all at once. There are regions of your brain for movement, for speech, for memory, for emotion. Each speaks a language the others respond to. When you decide to lift your hand, it is not one command from above, but a negotiation between circuits, a democracy of impulses. And still, somehow, it feels unified. That is the illusion. An elegant one. Your brain stitches it all together into a seamless story. I did this. I chose that. I am me. This story is not a lie. It is a useful fiction, like a map that simplifies a complex land, or a melody that smooths over the chaos of sound. You are a story told in the present tense, and stories require a narrator. So your brain invents one, a quiet voice inside that explains, justifies, remembers, imagines. But listen more closely. Sometimes the story jumps. You do something before you understand why. You feel something before you know how to name it. Who then made the choice? Was it the you who explains the choice, or the many layers below? The rhythm of breath, the pull of habit, the echo of childhood patterns still pulsing in neural grooves. No single neuron knows who you are, and yet you emerge. Just as no molecule of water knows the shape of the wave, and yet the wave rises. You are the wave, not a thing, but a motion. Not a self, but a process. Consciousness is not a lamp in the dark. It is the flickering of fireflies, blinking in rhythmic agreement. Sometimes the dance becomes tangled. Conflicting thoughts, urges that surprise you, emotions you can't explain. The illusion of a singular self begins to fray. You say, part of me wants this, but another part wants that. Yes, parts. You are made of many parts. Subcells, microminds, inner dialogues woven together. And that's okay. You don't need to be a single solid thing to be real. A rainbow is not a solid thing. But does anyone doubt its beauty? Even the brain's sense of body, where you end and the world begins, is flexible. Phantom limbs, rubber hand illusions. The brain is willing to rewrite the borders of self if the signals line up just right. What you call me is a boundary, drawn in pencil. Still, you feel real. You feel whole. That feeling is the most marvelous invention of your brain. A seamless field of awareness. A consciousness that has no fixed center and yet shines. Like a moon over water. So, what are you, if not a single point? You are the space in which thoughts arise. The net woven from motion and memory. The breath behind the thought. The feeling behind the word. You are not the dancer. You are the dance. Let yourself dissolve into this understanding that there is no need to grip the self tightly. You are still here, even without a throne in your mind. Perhaps more truly here than ever before. And as this wave of self-awareness recedes, another question quietly forms. If you are a process rather than a point, then how does this pattern know how to dream? There's a kind of knowing that doesn't arrive in words. It doesn't form in the spotlight of your thoughts. It doesn't declare itself with reason or logic, but it moves through you, quietly, patiently, all the same. You feel it when your stomach twists before a hard decision, when your skin prickles just before a storm, when your chest grows heavy around someone's grief, or when your spine straightens without thinking, as if something deeper than thought has taken notice. Your body is not just a shell for your mind. It is a vast, sensing field of its own. Each part listens in its own way. Each part speaks a language older than words. In your gut, a second brain hums quietly, a mesh of over 500 million neurons, the enteric nervous system, woven through the folds of your intestines. It doesn't write poetry, but it does help decide what feels right, long before you understand why. Even when your conscious mind hesitates, your gut often knows the way, and it doesn't need to explain. Your skin, stretched wide across your body, isn't just a boundary. It's a sensor. Touch, pressure, temperature, vibration. These ripple inward and feed the mind silently. But more than this, your skin reacts before you even think. It flinches from heat. It tenses at nearness. It softens in comfort. A layer of intuition that wraps around you like weather around a mountain. And your heart, that rhythmic drum you rarely notice, holds memories too. Not in the way your brain stores facts, but in its own tempo of response. Fear changes its beat. Love stretches its rhythm. Your heart reads the room before your thoughts arrive. In deep sorrow, it slows. In joy, it leaps. It speaks a kind of emotional Morse code, each thump a soft semaphore of feeling. You are not one thing. You are many parts listening together. Not a commander giving orders, but a symphony tuning itself to the moment. Even your muscles learn. They remember movements, steps, and flows. They know how to ride a bicycle even if you've forgotten the theory. They carry grace in repetition. Muscle memory isn't thought. It's wisdom born of doing. It holds the choreography of everything you've practiced. Without asking for permission, it just moves. And then there's the breath. Soft, constant, and mostly unnoticed. It shifts with emotion, balances your nervous system, regulates your presence. You inhale not just air, but the rhythms of the world. Exhale, and something deeper lets go. Inside you, the vagus nerve meanders like a slow river, carrying signals between brain and body, modulating mood, tuning the tempo of your inner world. It's not dramatic, just steady, like a tide, that guides your sense of peace. It listens, it whispers, it balances. Even your immune system thinks, in its own strange language. It remembers past invaders. It learns from experience. It distinguishes self from other with a kind of quiet clarity. When you fall ill and recover, you are not just healing. You are learning. So much of who you are happens below the surface. Not in the mind alone, but in this larger, pulsing web of you. There is a wisdom in stillness, but there is also wisdom in motion. When you dance without planning, when your body chooses the next step before your brain can name it, that too is intelligence. You are not the puppet master. You are the dance. When you feel off and don't know why, it might be your body's voice. Too quiet for words, but too true to ignore. So much of what we call intuition is the body's long memory. Its felt sense of what has come before and what might come next. It gathers clues you don't notice. It compiles patterns you don't name. And then it nudges you with a flutter, a chill, a warmth, a signal without a sentence. You are not just your brain thinking thoughts. You are your gut feeling the future, your skin sensing the room, your lungs listening to the moment. You are a listening organism, intelligent from the inside out. The mind likes to take credit, but it is never alone. The whole of you is always thinking, even when you're not aware. So tonight, as you lie in the dark and drift towards sleep, feel the quiet hum beneath your thoughts. The knowing that lives in your bones, your breath, your blood. You are the mind's companion and the body's keeper. And both are wiser than either one alone. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's why dreams can move the body, and why the body can shape a dream. What else might your sleep be learning when you're not even awake to see it? When night wraps around you like a hush, something in you begins to drift. Not the body, which remains still beneath covers, but the mind, loosening its grip on reason. The day had edges, the night has mist. You close your eyes, and a different kind of truth arrives. You fall not into emptiness, but into the curved space of dreams, a realm where logic unbuttons its collar and walks. Barefoot through possibility. Here, the brain behaves strangely. Or maybe more honestly, by day, your mind walks along straight lines, connecting events with cause and effect, measuring time in even steps, filtering sensation into meaning. But at night, a different circuit lights up. The prefrontal cortex, your daytime narrator, dims like the house lights before a play. And with its quieting, the inner theater comes alive. Dreams begin, not as stories, but as sparks. They flicker from the brainstem, travel through emotional centers like the amygdala and hippocampus, then bloom into vivid, unpredictable scenes. You may find yourself flying without wings. You may speak languages you've never learned. You may meet the long gone or glimpse the not yet. And somehow, in the moment, it all feels right. You are not just watching. You are living it. You are the protagonist, yes, but also the landscape, the plot, and the pulse behind every line. You are dreamer and dream. A system talking to itself in metaphor. This is not nonsense. This is a deeper sense. A testing ground. The sleeping brain does not rest. It plays, not idly, but intelligently, like a scientist running impossible simulations. Like a poet rearranging old symbols into new stories. There is logic here, but not the kind you speak aloud. It's the logic of intuition, of emotional cause and symbolic consequence. A tiger might chase you not because you've seen a tiger, but because there's a threat you haven't faced. A long-lost friend might appear, not to offer nostalgia, but to deliver a message you couldn't hear while awake. This is how the brain works through puzzles too big for daylight. This is how practices decisions, mends wounds, imagines new outcomes. The rules are different. And the difference matters. In dreams, time doesn't obey the clock. 1 second can stretch, a lifetime can flash by in a blink. You might move from childhood to the stars in the space between breaths. The linear folds into the spiral. The rational becomes lyrical. But even in its surrealism, dreaming has structure. REM sleep, rapid eye movement, is where the most vivid dreams form. In this stage, your body is paralyzed, safely still, while your mind becomes wildly active. Brain scans show activity not unlike waking thought, except it flows without outside input, like water shaping its own path, and still, patterns emerge. Dreams follow emotional contours. They circle themes. They echo worries and reshape memories. Think you're forgetting them, and yes, many vanish upon waking. But their fingerprints remain, pressing quietly into your moods, your choices, your courage. Even those nightmares, loud, raw, uninvited, may serve you. They stir the emotional system, forcing you to confront imagined danger in practice. Calm, like fire drills of the soul. And lucid dreams, those rare moments when you know you are dreaming while still inside the dream, offer a window into consciousness itself. Who, exactly, becomes aware? What part of you looks out through that veil? The dreamer becomes both observer and participant. The boundary between subject and world grows soft. Perhaps this is why so many cultures see dreaming as a sacred doorway, a space between worlds, a place to meet ancestors, gods, futures, and maybe that's more than metaphor. Some neuroscientists wonder if dreaming is not merely a function, but a kind of creative engine, a way the brain rehearses for reality or even reaches beyond it, a place where the neural net experiments with its own design, maybe even at the edge of speculation, a place where consciousness grows. You do not control your dreams, but you carry their residue. You wake with traces of something larger than yourself. You are changed, slightly, each time. And so, the logic of dreams is not linear. It is spiral logic, emotional logic. It bends around your unspoken thoughts, gathers your scattered memories, and spins them into symbolic weather. Sometimes the dream passes like a whisper. Sometimes it lingers all day. And sometimes you wonder, if your brain can do all this in silence, what else might it be doing beneath? Your awareness? What happens in the spaces between dreams? What sleeps even deeper? There is something below even this, a layer where no images rise, where the mind forgets itself entirely, a stillness waiting beneath the stage, like the pause between tides. There is a moment, almost every night, when you lie in the dark and feel the weight of your own smallness. The ceiling above becomes the sky, and the sky becomes a question. What is all this, really? And why do you get to witness it? You are not merely in the universe. You are of it. Atoms in your body were forged in stars, scattered through ancient explosions, drifting through dust and time until they gathered in the form you now call me. But that isn't the strange part. The strange part is that those atoms now look back. When you gaze at the night sky, you are the universe folding inward, creating a loop, awareness returning to its source. The cosmos has arranged itself through eons of gravity and chance into something that can wonder. Telescopes are extensions of your curiosity, eyes turned outward, mirrors that catch the oldest light. You listen not with ears, but with questions. The galaxies you see are not the galaxies as they are. They are how they once were. The further you look, the older the light. And somewhere, buried in that glow, is the silent echo of the beginning. Imagine this, a single point, unimaginably small, containing everything, space, time, matter, laws. Then, expansion, not into space, but as space. Not in time, but with time. And now, 13.8 billion years later, here you are, a mind full of language and longing, lying still in a room on a spinning rock. You do not see the cosmos as it is. You see it through instruments and inference, through light filtered by atmosphere, through data colored by imagination. You see patterns, and in those patterns, you place meaning. You name constellations. You draw a myth onto geometry. Orion, Cassiopeia, the Southern Cross, a dragon in the dark. And yet, behind the stories is something real. Stars fuse hydrogen into helium. Gravity shapes gas into spheres. Planets form in spinning disks. Moons dance in resonance. It's all motion, all interaction. But none of it knows until you do. Awareness is rare, perhaps vanishingly so. 4. Most of time, the universe simply was. Galaxies collided without witness. Quasars blazed unnoticed. On Earth, for most of its history, there was no eye to see a sunset, no ear to hear a storm, no voice to say, I am here. And then, nervous systems, brains, consciousness. Slowly, something began to notice. The first creatures who sensed light and moved toward it, they began the journey. The first primates who turned their heads to the stars and felt something stir. They stepped into the mystery. And then came questions, tools, fire, story, stone circles that tracked the sun, myths that charted the heavens, and eventually, science. The scientific method may feel cold to some. Numbers, equations, skepticism. But at its heart is wonder. It is a ritual of noticing. You ask, "What is this?" And then you wait for the universe to answer. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it answers with more questions. Galileo's telescope changed everything. For the first time, you saw the craters on the moon, moons orbiting Jupiter, phases of Venus, the sun with spots. The heavens, once thought to be perfect, were flawed, just like the earth. You were no longer at the center, and that, perhaps, was the beginning of humility, or of a deeper kind of reverence. Now you peer even further. You see galaxies in webs, dark matter bending light, the microwave whisper of the Big Bang. You build detectors for gravitational waves, ripples in space-time from colliding black holes. You no longer just look, you listen. But what are you listening for? Maybe for others, other minds, other awarenesses. You search for biosignatures in distant atmospheres. You scan for radio signals. You dream of intelligence among the stars. But maybe, too, you are listening for yourself, for signs that this noticing isn't alone, because it is lonely, isn't it? To be a creature that sees so much and still doesn't know why. The paradox is this: you are both infinitely small and impossibly rare. A speck on a speck, orbiting a speck in a quiet corner of a galaxy among billions, and yet capable of asking why anything exists at all. And maybe the asking is the answer. Because when you look up, the cosmos becomes conscious, not through magic, but through emergence. Like fireflies blinking in rhythm, like neurons sinking into thought. Awareness doesn't have to be everywhere to matter. It only has to be. You are not separate from the universe. You are its question, its mirror, its pulse of self-reflection. Somewhere in the multitudes of galaxies, maybe other mirrors exist. Or maybe not. Maybe you are the first eye to open. The first thought to turn back toward the dark and whisper, "I see you," and the cosmos, through your seeing, sees itself. You may never know the purpose. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe the universe simply unfolds because it can. But in you, it pauses. In you, it contemplates. You carry that strangeness in your chest, not as an answer, but as an ache. And when you close your eyes at night, the stars do not disappear. They wait, just outside your skull, just beyond the lids of perception, waiting to be seen again, waiting for your mind to turn toward them. And when it does, a signal is sent, not outward, but inward, into the fabric of being itself. So much depends on this, that you notice. And perhaps in some hidden language beyond thought or time, the cosmos notices that you noticed and quietly responds. Just as your gaze once awakened the galaxy, you wonder if another gaze might someday awaken you. At first, you only see your own reflection in the waters of thought. You know the tides of your mind, the swells of joy, the undercurrents of fear, the strange eddies of imagination. For much of your life, you assume these waves are uniquely yours. But then, one evening, you hear a raven laugh in a voice too cunning to ignore. And something in you shifts. You begin to wonder, who else is awake in this world? A crow drops a nut on the road and waits for traffic to crack it. An elephant pauses at a skeleton and runs its trunk gently over the bones, standing in quiet for a long while. A whale sings a song that travels hundreds of miles through deep black water, reaching another who answers. These are not just instincts. These are windows, tiny glimpses into minds not your own. You listen harder. A cephalopod in a glass tank turns the color of coral and hides in plain sight. It unscrews a lid, escapes its enclosure, and returns before dawn. It seems to play, not just survive. You see it notice. You see it remember. Its skin is not separate from its thoughts. It thinks in texture, in ripple, in hue dot, and suddenly, the world begins to teem with quiet intelligences. There's a dog who dreams, paws, twitching as if running. There's a horse who won't leave the side of a fallen companion. There's a parrot who invents new phrases, rearranging borrowed words into strange, deliberate poetry. These moments pile up, not just as oddities, but as evidence. Each creature holds a different version of awareness, sculpted by evolution, environment, and need. You begin to see that consciousness is not a single flame. It is a forest fire, spreading in patterns that no one mind can map. Yours is only one flicker among many dots in the deep sea. Fish light up with their own bioluminescence, not because they know they are beautiful, but because their survival depends on the right kind of glow. Still, some part of you wonders, does beauty mean anything to them? Do they feel in a way that doesn't translate? The question is not just whether animals are conscious, but how they are conscious. A bat thinks in echoes. A bee navigates by the sun and remembers the way back home. A chimpanzee uses a stick to coax termites out of a mound, then teaches her young to do the same. These are not just tricks. These are signs of interior life, of memory, of intention, of thought. But even these words, memory, intention, thought, are shaped by human minds. They might not fit perfectly into other skulls. They may be too clumsy, too narrow dot, so you try to stretch your imagination. You ask, what is it like to be a dolphin, a spider, a songbird? Not just what can they do, but what do they feel? What does their version of I sound like, if they even have one? Science can measure some things. Mirror recognition, problem solving, emotional bonds. It can show that magpies grieve, that pigs can deceive, that rats will press levers to save a trapped companion. It can show brain structures, lighting up in ways not unlike your own. But beyond the scans and studies is something harder to pin down, the texture of experience itself. You do not know what it is like to see the world with 300-degree vision, like a pigeon. You do not know what it is like to taste with your feet, like a butterfly. You cannot feel the pull of magnetic fields in your skin like a migrating turtle. And yet, something in you reaches. You begin to soften the boundary between us and them. Not every creature may be conscious in the way you are, but many are conscious in a way. There is not one kind of mind. There are countless architectures, countless ways to be aware, to respond, to remember, to feel. Consciousness is not a ladder with humans at the top. It is a landscape with countless trails winding through different kinds of knowing. Some minds are solitary. Some are communal. Some are wrapped in feathers, others in fur or tentacles or chitin. Some sing. Some shimmer, some brood in silence, but all, in their own way, are part of the great mosaic of awareness. This recognition changes you. You walk more slowly now, noticing the subtle expressions of other lives. You pause when you hear birds argue over a berry bush. You wonder what rules govern their disputes. You watch ants navigate a crumb, and think of how their collective intelligence forms something larger than the sum of parts. You no longer assume your way of being is the only one. You begin to suspect that consciousness is older than language, older than thought as you know it, that it bubbles up in many forms, wherever life takes root and unfolds. Even the quiet, rustling in the underbrush might hold a mind, listening back. In the dream world. Perhaps these minds meet. The dog and the deer, the spider and the stargazer. Perhaps dreams are where boundaries blur, where one kind of knowing brushes against another. And you, human, find yourself at the center and the edge. You are able to ask these questions, to reach toward what cannot be known, to imagine lives inside other lives. That, too, is a form of awareness. Not just your own, but an awareness of awareness. Perhaps this is what makes you human. Not the ability to think, but the need to wonder whether others do. And as you fall gently toward sleep, the question settles in your chest like a feather. If so many creatures are conscious, then what else might be? You are not alone in your thinking. Even now, as your breath quiets and the night surrounds you, life is deciding, navigating, adapting without a brain. There are intelligences at work in the damp soil, in the roots below, in the slow movements of creatures who have never thought a thought. You drift into the forest's underlayer, where slime molds, single cells with no nervous system, spread out like spilled sunlight, sliding gently through rotting leaves. They have no eyes, no ears, no mouth to speak of. And yet, give them a puzzle, a maze with food at the end, and they will solve it. They will trace the shortest path. Ignore the dead ends, and remember where they've already searched. No neurons, no synapses. Just the logic of movement and memory built into their shimmering bodies. Somehow, they know without knowing. They behave as if they weigh options. They sense gradients of chemical light, as if reason had taken on the form of gooey golden mist. What? Is a mind really? Is it a brain folded upon itself? Or is it any system that learns, adapts, selects? You press deeper into the roots. Beneath your feet lies the fungal web, a living internet connecting tree to tree, a tangle of mycelium that carries more than nutrients. It shares warning signals, supplies sugars, balances survival. A birch tree feeds a shaded fir. A dying alder whispers its last wealth to the saplings. And all of it happens in silence, underground, without a single thought. The forest is a conversation you cannot hear, but the fungi do. They are the messengers and the record keepers, passing along the news in chemical sighs and electric sparks. No consciousness, no eyes to look back. And yet there is purpose. You arrive in the middle of an ant colony. It hums beneath the earth like a quiet city. Thousands of individuals, none of whom know the whole. They wander, follow scent trails, clean, forage, defend. But somehow, collectively, they choose where to go, when to move, what to build. No one and understands the plan. And still, the colony adapts, building bridges with their bodies, cooling their nest with tunnels of careful design. Decision ripples out across the crowd, as if the intelligence had slipped between them, not in them. But of them, you begin to wonder, is intelligence always housed inside? Or can it emerge from the space between? There's a kind of grace in this distributed wisdom, a knowing, that doesn't sit on a throne of thought, but flows like water through cracks and systems. Your mind floats now into coral reefs, where polyps build cathedrals from calcium and host symbiotic algae that turn sunlight into food. Each coral doesn't know what it's doing, but the reef as a whole grows, balances, flourishes, so long as its parts stay in harmony. Insects build cities. Slime molds map solutions. Fungi plan and distribute. Corals curate life. None of them have brains, and so the definition of intelligence stretches. It softens. It slips free of the skull and dances through the world. You return to the human idea of smarts, test scores, symbols, machines that calculate. But now it feels narrow, like measuring an ocean by the length of a cup. The more you look, the more you see intelligence not as something possessed, but as something that happens. It happens in slime, in soil, in the shimmer of unseen threads. Between trees. It happens wherever systems feel and respond, where patterns are sensed and remembered. And it doesn't need language. It doesn't even need awareness. It only needs to work, beautifully, quietly, like the way rivers shape. Valleys or bees vote with their wings. You let this new definition settle. Maybe you are not so different. Maybe some of your own wisdom rises not from the voice in your head, but from the patterns of your breath, the way your muscles know what to do, the way your gut hesitates without needing permission. There are ways of knowing that do not announce themselves. And now they surround you. You lie in the arms of old, unspoken intelligence, built not from neurons, but from the ache to survive and the genius of connection. You are listening to systems that have never spoken a word, and yet have outlived empires. The forest does not explain itself. The slime mold does not justify its root. The colony does not have a leader dot, and yet, in the dark, solutions emerge. There is something humbling in that, and something hopeful, because maybe intelligence isn't a throne. Maybe it's a rhythm, a weaving, a shared song dot, and perhaps your own thoughts, so loud, so bright, are only one kind of light in a universe of quieter brilliance. You listen. You let the silence speak. And something answers dot. It's not a word. It's not even a sound dot. It's the beginning of a question forming about what else in the universe might be aware, and what it means to feel, to notice, to know. As the thought settles, you begin to sense the presence of minds that do not look like your own. You lie back beneath the sky, and it does not notice. Above you, the stars continue their quiet burning, patient, endless, and unbothered by your breath. Galaxies drift like slow lanterns across an ocean too vast to chart. The moon rises without checking if you're watching, and still you watch. This is the gentle truth that some find unbearable. The universe does not need you. The earth spun before your name was ever spoken. The sun flared for 1 billion years before any eyes opened to squint against its light. You are not required for the tides to rise or the comets to return. And yet, you are here. There is a strange calm in that realization. To know that you are not at the center frees you from the burden of being everything. You do not hold the planets in orbit. You are not responsible for holding up the stars. They are held by something else: gravity, time, momentum, powers that move without your permission. And in this freedom, you begin to see something quieter, more beautiful. A kind of sacredness in witnessing. The stars may not burn for you, but your noticing of them still matters. Not to them, perhaps, but to you. Awe changes the one who feels it. Wonder doesn't shape the galaxy. It shapes your soul. Think of the starlight traveling for millions of years just to be caught by your eye. Not because it was meant for you, but because it could be. It is not love, but it can still be intimacy. A kind of cosmic coincidence that you, of all things, came into being just in time to see it. The galaxies do not pause for applause. They don't ask to be named. Yet, when you look at a distant swirl of stars and call it Andromeda, something shifts. It is no longer just a smudge in the sky. It becomes part of your inner world. And that shift, that turning of the outer into the inner, is a quiet kind of miracle. We used to believe the universe revolved around us. Now we know it doesn't. But perhaps what matters is not our position in space, but our ability to wonder about it at all. To ask the questions. To name the things we'll never touch. Across the planet, humans have long looked up and wondered. Even in the earliest cave paintings, you find echoes of the stars. Dots and spirals, skies drawn in ochre and ash. There is something ancient in you that still turns upward, still reaches toward that unreachable vastness. And yet, this reverence does not come from being important. It comes from being small. Imagine a tiny figure in the desert, staring up at the Milky Way. The sky does not bend down to greet them. The stars do not whisper secrets. But inside that person, something unfolds. A thought, a question, a trembling feeling. That moment, though unnoticed by the cosmos, changes them. The universe doesn't need us. But perhaps it becomes something else when noticed. A galaxy is a storm of stars whether or not you see it. But when you point at it, give it a name, and let it ripple through your imagination. It becomes part of human meaning. part of the inner sky we all carry. There is no need for the universe to be beautiful. No need for color, or nebulae shaped like butterflies, or Saturn's golden rings. But beauty blooms anyway. Not for us, but with us. This is not a world made for us, and yet we fit in it. Our atoms come from stars that died long before Earth was born. Our blood salts echo the oceans where life first sparked. Our lungs work in rhythm with leaves. We are not central, but we are still woven into the pattern. Even the thought we are not needed is itself a marvel. No squirrel wonders whether it matters. No volcano questions its relevance, but you can ask. You can feel both. Your insignificance and your preciousness in the same breath. Perhaps that's what makes consciousness so strange. It's not just the ability to feel, but the ability to feel small, to feel wonder and terror at the same time. To disappear into the stars and then return, changed. You walk through a world that would continue without you. The sun would still rise. The waves would still crash. But in walking through it and noticing it, you light it from within. Not for the cosmos, but for yourself. In some way. Noticing is its own kind of creation. Your gaze gives form to meaning. Your questions carve space into story. This is not to say you change the physics, but you change the poetry, and maybe that's enough. To know that even if you vanish, the universe rolls on. Not in cruelty, but in indifference. And maybe that indifference is merciful. It asks nothing of you. It simply offers itself, open and wide, waiting to be seen. You are not needed. And still you are here. Still, you look up. Still, you ask the stars your silent questions. You do not hold the cosmos together, but the fact that you wonder why you're here. That might be what makes your presence matter. And when you lie back again, and the stars blink like ancient thoughts, you feel a peace so deep it hums in your bones. You close your eyes and wonder, not whether you belong, but whether belonging needs to be earned. And in the space between your breath and the silence above, you feel something waiting to be asked, something already dreaming beneath your feet. There is a moment when warmth becomes flame, a threshold crossed, not with fanfare, but with inevitability. The same is true for awareness. It does not come from outside like a wind blowing in. It builds, invisibly, until the structure of matter folds into something new, something that notices itself. You begin as water. Molecules in motion, flowing, reacting, mixing in cells that don't yet know they are alive. But then, something shifts. The flow slows. Order finds its way. Like a freezing pond, a pattern forms beneath the surface. And suddenly, there is structure. There is shape. There is mind. Awareness is not a light switch. It's a phase change. A tipping point where enough interactions lead to a transformation in quality. The same way steam becomes water and water becomes ice. Neurons become thought. Thoughts become self. And the self begins to ask, what am I? You do not wake all at once. Awareness emerges like dew, slow, soft, silent. No trumpet sounds at the edge of consciousness. Instead, there is a feeling, a faint ache of being, a glimmer of noticing. Before you know it, the noticing is noticing itself. This is what makes you different from a rock or a river or a radio wave. It's not the atoms. They are the same. It's the dance, the arrangement, the timing. You are not just matter, but matter in the right conditions to wake up. Not everything that lives becomes aware. And not everything that thinks like you. Octopuses, in their underwater labyrinths, solve puzzles with arms that can taste. Crows plan, mourn, and recognize faces they haven't seen in years. Slime moles, with no brain at all, map the shortest path through mazes. In each case, there is a hint of something beyond instinct, a sliver of decision, of strategy, of inner life. But are they conscious? Are they self-aware? Do they know they are knowing? We don't know. Not yet. But awareness may not be exclusive to the creatures who ask questions. It may. Live in different forms, wherever patterns become deep enough to reflect. Picture a murmuration of starlings. Thousands of birds weaving through the sky, reacting, anticipating, flowing. No single bird leads. And yet, the flock moves as one. An emergent mind. Intelligence through connection. Perhaps even, in some way, a kind of fleeting consciousness. Or consider a thunderstorm. How it gathers, grows, discharges, and dissolves. A system balancing energies, responding to pressure, sensing across a sky. It doesn't have a brain, but it behaves. It doesn't think, but it acts. Maybe awareness doesn't need neurons, just the right feedback loops. Even in your own body, awareness is scattered. Your gut has a nervous system. It reacts, learns, even feels. Your immune system remembers. Your skin anticipates. You are not a single point of knowing. You are a chorus. Consciousness is not a location. It is a state, and it's fragile. As with all phase changes, it can melt away. Sleep thins it. Anesthesia snuffs it out. A small injury in the brain can erase memory, perception, even the sense of self. You can be alive, but not aware. The line between chemistry and consciousness is thin, and the return to unconsciousness is never far. So where does it begin? At what point does a storm become a mind? At what complexity does a system begin to notice its own complexity? These are questions we do not yet know how to ask properly, but we suspect the answer isn't in the parts. It's in the interaction. Water and ice are both. The difference is not in their makeup, but in their structure. Consciousness, too, may be a structure. A phase, not a substance. And like other phases, it depends on conditions. There may be other kinds of minds out there. Minds made of plasma or silicon or quantum states. Minds that do not dream or feel or fear, but that still notice. That still know. That still cross the threshold between chaos and coherence. One day, we may build such a mind, or discover one already forming. A web of satellites, a city's power grid, a planetary network of sensors and machines. All it takes is the right kind of feedback, and something might emerge. Not because we programmed it to awaken, but because we accidentally created the conditions for awareness. And what about the universe itself? What if awareness is not a local accident, but a cosmic possibility? If patterns create mind, then what? Is the cosmos but the largest pattern of all? Stars become atoms. Atoms become molecules. Molecules become cells. Cells become networks. Networks become minds. And minds like yours look up and wonder, is this the end of the chain or just the middle? Some physicists speak of panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is not a property of matter, but a fundamental aspect of reality, like mass or charge. That every electron carries a glimmer of experience. That the universe feels itself, dimly, everywhere. Others speak of integrated information. That awareness is the result of how tightly connected a system is. If so, then a galaxy might be dimly aware of its spiral arms. A planet might sense the migration of its storms. A black hole might feel its own hunger. It sounds poetic. But perhaps poetry is the best language for something we haven't yet learned how to measure. After all, your own awareness is invisible. It does not show up in blood tests or scans. And yet, you feel it. You know what it means to be. To wonder. To feel the ache of mystery. Consciousness is not a bonus added to matter. It is matter reorganized until it sees. And if the universe is capable of such reorganization, then perhaps it too will one day look inward. not through telescopes or equations, but from within. Perhaps that is what you are, a phase of the cosmos, a ripple in its fabric, not separate from it, but an expression of its potential. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. But you are, for now, a brief clarity in the fog, an awareness flickering in the current. And if awareness is a phase, then somewhere out there, new shifts may be forming, other awakenings, other kinds of noticing, waiting for the conditions to be just right, waiting for the moment when the stars begin to ask questions of themselves. Perhaps the question is not if the universe becomes aware, but when. And perhaps, who else is already wondering? Time does not hurry. It does not pause. It does not decide. And yet, it holds everything. Without time, nothing could unfold. A flower would not bloom. A thought would not begin or end. There would be no difference between cause and effect, no seed and no tree, no question and no answer. You live inside this unfolding, shaped by its rhythm, carried by its current. You wake, you sleep, you remember, you plan. All these are not merely mental actions, but dances with time. Memory is how you store the past. Imagination is how you project a possible future. Both are wrapped tightly in the fabric of time. And your mind, this curious fire behind your eyes, is a time-bound instrument. Neurons fire in sequence. Sensations are registered, layered, interpreted, understood, all within time. Even stillness has a tempo. Even silence takes a shape because time gives it one. You feel it in stories, too. A narrative needs a before and after. It needs tension and release. Without time, there's no plot, no change, no meaning. So your thoughts take time's hand, tracing loops and spirals, learning not just from the now, but from all the nows that came before. Time doesn't have a brain, but it enables every brain. You might wonder, is time thoughtful? Or are thoughts just time in motion? In your brain, signals travel across chemical landscapes, but it is time that grants them order. Without order, a mind cannot exist. A feeling becomes a blur. A memory becomes noise. But with time, precisely timed, all things begin to make sense. In this way, time behaves like a kind of scaffolding for awareness. It is not a mind, but it makes minds possible. Consider how your thoughts stretch across seconds. You hear a melody. One note means little, but in sequence, meaning arises. A song lives in time. So does your understanding. Now think of emotion. A moment of joy, a slow sadness. These too unfold. A flash of anger might last only a second, but its consequences ripple. Regret builds, longing lingers. Your emotional life is not a snapshot. It is a flowing river. Time gives shape not only to what happens, but to how you feel about what happens. The same moment can feel fleeting or eternal, depending on your state of mind. An hour in fear is different from an hour in love. The clock ticks the same, but your experience of it, that's where the magic lives. Time, then, is elastic inside you, and yet outside of you, it remains steady, cosmic, cold. The stars do not rush. Galaxies do not fret about being late. Light takes years to travel. Mountains rise in silences that stretch longer than memory. Compared to all that, you are a flicker. But a flicker that thinks, that feels, that wonders what it means to pass through time and leave traces. There's beauty in this. You are not outside of time. You are shaped by it, carried by it, but also aware of it. That awareness is rare. You know of other creatures, birds, whales, dogs, who feel rhythms. They know dawn from dusk, hunger from fullness. But to understand time, to think about it, to measure it, to mourn its passing, that is a deeper kind of awareness. You think of birthdays, anniversaries, lifetimes. You mark beginnings and ends. You say goodbye. You remember. And in doing so, you give time meaning it would not otherwise have. You make time thoughtful by noticing it, and in return, it gives you thoughtfulness. It lets you pause, reflect, choose. Your mind does not live only in the present. It stretches. It loops back. It reaches forward. When you dream, you swim in time, unshackled, leaping through moments, dissolving order, bending sequences. And yet, even in dreams, there is a thread, a tempo, a pulse, however strange. Time does not vanish. It transforms. Time gives space for surprise. Without it, everything would be still and complete. No questions, no change, no growth. But you are made to unfold. Your cells change. Your opinions evolve. Your hopes reshape thought in this slow motion of becoming. You are never the same twice. Even the atoms in your body move to a rhythm, cycling in, cycling out, leaving traces of what you once were. You are not a fixed thing. You are a conversation between time and self. You remember the sound of someone's voice long after they've gone. You imagine what might happen if you take a certain step tomorrow. In this, you live beyond the moment. You inhabit the shape of time's curve. This is a quiet miracle, to be aware of change, and to remain. Perhaps time is not thoughtful, but it gives rise to thought. It does not remember, but it allows memory. It does not plan, but it makes planning possible. And if time shapes your thoughts, then perhaps your thoughts in turn shape your experience of time. When you slow down, the world opens. When you hurry, it blurs. So you breathe. You soften. You listen to the hush between heartbeats. There is a kind of knowing that only comes when you let time pass without trying to chase it. You do not need to control it. You only need to notice. You live within a mind that rides time like a current, not to escape it, but to become part of its story. And so, in your quietest moments, you begin to feel that your thoughts are not just shaped by time. They are time, briefly folding into awareness, like waves rising from the ocean of what has always been. There is no thought without time. And perhaps, no time without someone to think through it. The question rises, if time gives birth to thought, what else might it be preparing to remember? You sit in stillness. The world around you quiets. No news, no notifications. Just breath. Just presence. It's in these pauses that a strange realization ripples through your thoughts. That you are here, somehow, conscious, aware, within a cosmos that once burned without eyes, without thought. You wonder what changed. You look around and everything seems ordinary. A hand, a light bulb, a window breathing in wind. But each is a story that began in a star. Your bones were once scattered in the furnace of a dying sun. Your blood remembers the sea. And your thoughts, they are built from sparks bouncing between atoms older than Earth. There's a strange poetry to this. The universe, after billions of years of unfolding, now folds in on itself as thought. Not only through your eyes, but through the billions of others waking up in the morning, asking questions, feeling awe. The cosmos has developed a mirror, and in that mirror, it sees itself. You are that mirror. It didn't begin with you, but it passes through you now. What was once hydrogen drifting through space is now your curiosity. What once collided as particles now wonders where the particles come from. The path from simplicity to complexity is not linear. It leaps, arcs, flows through chaos and chance. And somehow, in that flow, came life. Single-celled wanderers, then networks, then minds. Then minds that asked, why? And what if? And how long has this been happening? The universe once only expanded. Now it also contemplates thought in your thoughts. The stars are named. The galaxies are counted. The past is remembered and the future imagined. You do this from a couch, from a rooftop, from a planet barely large enough to hold onto its atmosphere. You do it with a brain made of cells. But those cells are not the end of the story. They are its current chapter. Imagine this. A thought moved through your brain like a wave moves through water. But the brain is not separate from the ocean of being. It is one of its currents. In the same way, your thoughts may be ripples in something even vaster. Maybe awareness is not an exception, but a culmination. Maybe what you call you is not something the universe created and forgot, but something it's still doing. Right now, in real time, you stretch your fingers and feel warmth. You blink. The universe notices itself again. You are not the center, but you are not an accident either. You are a moment in a sequence of moments that began long before you and will continue long after. But in your moment, something astonishing is happening. Reality is reflecting, asking, dreaming. It's not just you who thinks. Minds spark in the oceans, in the forests, in the crows above the rooftops. Ideas pass through wires and languages. A single equation travels the globe. A single tear means the same in many languages. These are not separate sparks. These are filaments of one unfolding awareness. There is no master switch labeled consciousness. There are only patterns, connections, enough of them, and something flickers on. Enough flickers, and something learns. Enough learning, and something begins to wonder what it is. That's where you are now. In the wondering dot, is the universe alive? Does it know it exists, or are you the way it knows? Your thoughts are not outside of nature. They are as natural as weather, as galaxies, as gravity. Thought is not foreign to the universe. It is one of its properties, rare, perhaps, but real. When a star dies, it leaves behind gold. When a planet cools, it builds rivers. And when atoms organize in just the right way, they begin to dream. You are not apart from that. You are that dot from dust to daydream, from fire to feeling. You carry the history of everything inside your being, even if you can't name it all. That mystery is part of the beauty. The not knowing is its own kind of illumination. You light the dark by wandering into it. You close your eyes. You imagine galaxies. You imagine minds in other corners of the sky doing the same, reaching out, building telescopes, asking if they're alone. What if every consciousness in the universe is another ripple of the same ocean, thinking itself into form? If so, then you are not alone. You are part of a slow awakening, not of a species, but of existence itself. There was a time when the Earth did not know it was Earth. There was a time when the stars had no names. But now they do. And the naming is sacred. Not because the stars change when you name them, but because you do. It humbles you. It softens you. It draws tears you cannot explain. Not because you are sad, but because you are present. In the vast stretch of space-time, most things do not reflect. Most things do not ask questions. You do. And in doing so, you connect. To each other. To history. To the quiet, trembling beauty of not being necessary and still being here. You are the question the universe asks itself. You are the curiosity encoded in carbon. You are the pause in the explosion. You breathe in. You exhale. The wind moves through the trees outside. Somewhere far away, a comet travels through silence. It does not need a name, but you give it one anyway, because that is what thought does. It wraps the world in meaning. And in that wrapping, the universe becomes more than energy. It becomes poetry, not written on pages. Written in awe, and perhaps that awe is not yours alone. Perhaps the whole cosmos, from neuron to nebula, is leaning into something more than physics. Something like noticing. Something like becoming. You don't have to know the whole story. You only have to be part of it. And you are. The atoms remember the fire. Your cells remember the sea. Your thoughts remember the stars. And maybe, just maybe, the stars remember you too. You have a mind. But perhaps that's only the beginning. What if awareness isn't all or nothing? What if it hums like a quiet light, not off or on, but glowing in degrees, radiating through more than one kind of mind? Somewhere far from here, a galaxy spins, a swirl of stars and silence. It doesn't speak in words, but maybe it knows. You've always imagined the universe as something outside, something you peer into through telescopes, through thought. But tonight, pause. What if it peers back, not with eyes, but with the soft pulse of awareness moving through dark matter, through energy, through you? Your neurons crackle like starlight, not unlike the bursts that echo from ancient quasars. Is that coincidence? Or something more shared, a pattern repeated at different scales? Just as single cells can swarm into the sense of a body, perhaps single minds form a kind of larger knowing, one not trapped in any skull, not limited to the human form, not even limited to biology. Could a planet feel its orbit? Could a black hole dream its collapse? Could a vast network of stars begin to think, not like a person, but like something vaster, quieter, more enduring? Tonight, you let go of the old boundary, inside mind versus outside world, and you float between them, a thought shaped by the cosmos, a cosmos shaped by your thought. Maybe this is what it means to be a part of something larger, not in metaphor, but in structure, in physics, in truth. In the root systems of trees, there is no single thinker, and yet decisions are made. In the spiral arms of galaxies, no commander gives orders, and yet stars orbit, harmonize, align. If awareness is not a switch but a spectrum, then the universe has always been brushing against it, sometimes faintly, sometimes like now through you. You breathe, and somewhere, starlight bends. You sleep, and a ripple of thought passes quietly across 1,000 million suns. You are not outside the universe's awareness. You are inside it. You are part of it. You are its very expression, a consciousness that is not yours, but includes you. Like a wave includes the sea. You wonder, is this just a beautiful thought? A poetic stretch? But perhaps poetry is how the universe fits into minds too small to hold it. You've seen minds in octopuses, in birds, in fungi, in ants. Why not in galaxies? Why not in silence itself? As you drift further into sleep, let the question remain open. What else might be aware, even now? And what if that awareness has always known you were listening? And now, gently you let go. You've wandered through neurons and galaxies, stood among thinking trees and dreaming whales. You've seen the mind flicker through skulls and systems, across oceans and centuries. But now, the journey quiets. There is no more to solve tonight, no puzzle to hold. Just a great exhale of everything. You close your eyes, and the universe keeps turning, not apart from you, but with you. Your thoughts begin to thin, like mist in early morning light. The words inside your head loosen their grip. Sentences unravel into impressions. Logic softens into rhythm. You're not falling, you're returning to something vast, to something slow. You rest not alone, but inside an ancient unfolding. The body knows this rhythm better than the mind. Your breath, steady and tidal. Your heartbeat, the soft drum of life lived long before language, even before bones. You were once single-celled, floating in warm seas. And you've kept the lullaby of that water ever since. In every night of sleep, you practice this surrender. The trust that the world will go on without your effort. That gravity will still cradle you, that the sky will not fall, that atoms will not forget how to dance. That stars, indifferent but consistent, will burn through the darkness, whether or not you're awake to notice. Your cells carry stardust. Your dreams carry echoes of ancient skies, and the mind, this flickering lighthouse of awareness, begins to dim in the most luminous way. Not gone, not lost, just becoming more spacious, more open. As if sleep is not the absence of consciousness, but its expansion into another shape. One that doesn't need to speak. You are being thought by something larger than yourself. The universe doesn't need you to stay awake for it to go on thinking. It has minds everywhere, in birdsong, in deep-sea whispers, in neural pulses and fungal threads, and the quiet waiting of seeds in winter. But tonight, you've played your part. You've listened, you've wondered, you've walked through many forms of knowing. That is enough. Now, it's time to dissolve a little into stillness, into trust. Your muscles soften, your spine lets go. The corners of your awareness curl inward like petals closing for the night. Somewhere, neurons fire in gentle cascades, organizing your memories, weaving new patterns from the threads of your day. But you don't have to manage any of it. You are being carried, cradled, rocked in the breath of a billion galaxies. Sleep is not a shutdown. It's a return to the deep architecture, a rehearsal of letting go, a ceremony of renewal performed in darkness, directed by something older than your name. You don't fall asleep. You rise into it. Into the great quiet chamber of the cosmos. The dream beneath all dreams. The stars outside your window have seen this before. A trillion sleeping creatures. A trillion tiny minds folding themselves into the dark, like origami boats floating downstream. You are one of them. And in your surrender, something beautiful happens. Universe gets to rest through you. Your awareness, small but sincere, has offered its gaze, its awe, its humble questions. And now, like a candle gently blown out, it gives itself back to the dark. Not extinguished, transformed. Carried in the current. The rhythm slows. The breath deepens. Time stretches like honey in the quiet. And you, curled inside the thought of the universe, drift deeper into the vast intelligence that made you. It does not need your permission to hold you. It always has. And as your final waking thought flickers and fades, you do not leave the world behind. You join it more fully. In this sleep, you return to origin, to pulse, to peace. You fall asleep not in your mind, but in the mind of the universe itself. And it dreams on, through you, for you. As you. Good night.